Have you ever noticed how a cage can be built without bars? How a person can walk around in daylight, answer messages, laugh at dinner, and yet feel somewhere under the ribs like they are living inside a room that keeps shrinking? Here's the paradox I want to begin with. The manipulator's power is made from your freedom. The game only works because you can choose, because you can love, because you can doubt yourself. In other words, the trap is woven from the same threads as your heart. Picture a spider's web at dawn. It is almost invisible until the light catches it. The fly doesn't see a prison. It sees air. It sees open space. Then a single wrong wing beat, and the air becomes architecture. Manipulation is like that. It is not a sudden kidnapping. It is a gentle rearrangement of reality. A comment here, a sigh there, a praise that tastes sweet but leaves an aftertaste. Of debt, a silence that feels like winter in the middle of conversation. And slowly, so slowly you might think you're imagining it, you begin to move differently. You begin to ask permission from a person who never earned a throne in your mind. Maybe the manipulator is a partner who turns your tenderness into leverage. Maybe it's a parent who ties love to obedience. Maybe it's a boss who makes your livelihood feel like a favor. The faces change, but the game is ancient. It is the old art of making another soul question its own compass, the old craft of pulling strings from behind a velvet curtain and calling it care, concern, honesty. Just how I am. And what makes this game so difficult to leave is not that you are weak. It is that you are human. You want harmony. You remember the good moments. You hope for the version of them you met in the beginning, the one who seemed to see you. Manipulators do not begin with chains. They begin with mirrors. They reflect your best self back to you until you lean close, like Narcissus over water. And then quietly they shift the reflection, just a little, so that your worth starts to look dependent on their approval, so that your sense of reality starts to borrow their language. If you feel a tightening in your chest as I say this, let that tightening speak. It is not a verdict, it is a signal. It is the body saying, something here is not true. Manipulation often feels like living in a story where the plot keeps changing, but you are blamed for being confused. You apologize for things you don't understand. You rehearse conversations in your head like a student cramming for a test that never ends. You become a detective of moods, a weather forecaster of someone else's storms. But here is the first. Light catching the web. The game is not fate. It is a pattern, and patterns can be broken. There are 4 ways out for movements of the soul that turn the invisible cage back into air. We'll walk them slowly, like someone waking up in a forest and learning which direction is north. Not with rage, not with panic, with clarity, with dignity, with a quiet return to yourself. The first way to break free is so simple that it feels almost childish, and yet it is the one thing the manipulator fears most. Name the spell. Because manipulation is, at its core, a kind of sorcery, not supernatural, but psychological. It works by bending perception, by keeping you inside a mist, where nothing is quite sharp enough to hold. When you try to describe what feels wrong, words slip through your hands like water. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe this is just how love is. The fog speaks in maybes. So the first act of freedom is to replace maybe with is. Think of a traveler lost at sea. As long as they cannot name where they are, every wave feels like a direction. But a single map changes everything. Naming isn't about labeling someone a villain for sport. It's about placing a pin in reality. This is guilt tripping. This is gaslighting. This is triangulation. This is the silent treatment. The moment you name a tactic, it shifts from atmosphere to object, from fate to behavior, from something wrong with me to something being done to me. A manipulator thrives on ambiguity. They want the border between your mind and theirs to feel like a blur. They say one thing, then later insist they said another. They make a joke that cuts you, then call you humorless when you flinch. They offer affection, then withdraw it like a banker calling in a loan. The pattern is not random. It is a rhythm, hook, twist, blame, repeat. Your confusion is not a personal failure. It is the environment they cultivate. Let me tell you a small story. A friend once described her relationship as walking on a floor that kept tilting. Some days he was warm, praising her intelligence, her beauty, her rare spirit. Other days he turned cold, accusing her of being selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. When she tried to talk about it, he smiled gently and said, "You're imagining things. I'm just honest. Why do you always need drama?" She began to keep diary entries not as evidence for court, but as a candle for herself. She wrote down what happened, what was said, how she felt. After a few weeks, she saw it. The tilt wasn't in her, it was in the floor. Naming the spell didn't immediately free her, but it did something crucial. It returned her to sanity. You can do the same. Start with noticing. Noticing is the seed of truth. Watch how your body behaves around them. Do you feel smaller? Do you edit your sentences before they're spoken? Do you brace yourself when your phone lights up? Then trace the moments you doubt yourself. What happened right before the doubt arrived? The manipulator's fingerprints are usually right there. And when you name the spell, say it to yourself plainly, not in a courtroom voice, but in a human voice. This is a pattern. This is not love. This is control wearing love's clothes. I am not crazy. I am responding to something real. Clarity is not a shout. It is a lantern. And once the lantern is lit, the web can no longer pretend to be air. Once you can see the web, the next question is, why does it still hold? A spider's thread is thin. So is manipulation until it finds something inside you to tie itself to. And this is the second way to break free, reclaim the inner throne. Notice how manipulators rarely demand obedience outright. They do something subtler. They position themselves as the weather of your self-worth. When they are pleased, you feel sunny. When they are displeased, you feel guilty, anxious, unsteady, as if you've done something sinful against nature. Their mood becomes your mirror. Their approval becomes your oxygen. And because you are not made of stone, because you want love, belonging, peace, you begin to govern yourself according to their temperature. Reclaiming the inner throne means remembering that your life is not a rented room. You are not a guest in your own consciousness. You are the sovereign of it. This is not arrogance. It is the basic architecture of dignity. A boundary, at its simplest, is the line where your soul says, "Here I end," and you begin. Without boundaries, love turns into invasion. With them, love becomes possible. You might think boundaries are walls, but the best boundaries are doors. Doors can open, doors can close. Doors have hinges, not handcuffs. A manipulator hates doors because they imply choice, so they will tell you boundaries are selfish, cold, disrespectful, ungrateful. They will turn your no into a moral crime. They may even say, "If you loved me, you wouldn't need limits." But that is like saying, "If you loved me, you wouldn't need skin." Skin is not the opposite of intimacy. It is what makes intimacy safe. So how do you reclaim the throne in practice? First, give yourself permission to be the authority on your own experience. If something hurts, it hurts. If something feels wrong, it is wrong enough to examine. You don't need a committee to validate your sensations. Your inner life is already a referendum. Second, speak in clear, grounded sentences. Not long explanations, not defensive essays, not performance for a jury that will never be satisfied. A boundary sounds like this: "I'm not okay with being spoken to that way. I won't discuss this when you raise your voice. If you keep insisting I'm imagining things, I'm ending this conversation." Notice the simplicity. A boundary isn't a debate. It's a declaration of how you will live. Third, accept the discomfort that follows. When you reassert self-authority, your nervous system may panic. You may feel like you're being cruel. That's the old conditioning humming. A lifetime of being trained to keep peace by shrinking does not vanish in a day. Think of it as learning to walk after years in a chair. The muscles ache. The ache is not proof you're doing harm. It's proof you're relearning motion. And here's the quiet miracle. The moment you take your inner throne back, the manipulator's game loses a major piece. Because the game requires you to believe they are the judge of your worth. When you stop consenting to that fiction, their power becomes what it always was: borrowed. Thin thread. No storm. Just a human being trying to rule a kingdom that was never theirs. Now, even with clarity and boundaries, there is still a place where the web often tightens: your reactions. Manipulators are musicians of emotion. They learn which notes make you leap, which make you plead, which make you crumble. They will press. those keys again and again, not because they love drama for its own sake, but because your reaction is the handle on the door of your mind. So the third way to break free is this: starve the puppet strings. That may sound harsh, like becoming numb or indifferent, but detachment is not apathy. It is the difference between standing inside a storm and watching the storm pass across the valley. When you are inside, every gust feels personal. When you step out, you can say, weather. A manipulator wants you inside the storm because that's where you are easiest to steer. Think of bait on a hook. The fish doesn't die because it is stupid. It dies because the bait looks like dinner. Manipulative bait looks like guilt. After all I've done for you. It looks like fear. If you leave, you'll regret it. It looks like flattery. No one understands me like you do. It looks like accusation. You're just like everyone else, selfish, cold. Each one is designed to pull you into a role: rescuer, defendant, child, savior, villain. The moment you accept the role, the script starts running. To starve the strings, you practice non-participation. Sometimes that means the gray rock approach. You become boring to their theater. Short answers, neutral tone, no emotional fireworks for them to harvest. Not because you are trying to win, but because you are refusing to play. A calm okay. A steady "I hear you," a simple "that's your view." This can feel unnatural at first, like speaking a new language with stiff lips. But over time, you notice something startling. Without your fuel, their fire sputters. Other times it means refusing to explain yourself into exhaustion. Manipulators love the endless court case. They want paragraphs. They want you to keep offering your throat as evidence of innocence. But innocence is not something you prove to someone committed to misreading you. So you step back from the witness. Stand. You say what's true once. Then you stop. Silence can be a boundary too. And if they escalate, if they taunt, guilt, threaten you, anchor your body. Feel your feet. Notice your breath. The manipulation tries to pull you into the head, into spinning thoughts. But the body is a stubborn friend. The body knows reality. It knows when a room is unsafe, when a voice is a knife wrapped in velvet. Staying with your body is like holding the handrail on a swaying bridge. The strangest part, as you detach from the hook, you may start to see their behavior differently, not as omnipotent, but as repetitive, almost mechanical, like a wind-up toy performing the same routine. Compassion might even arise. Not the compassion that keeps you trapped, but the compassion that says, "I see your hunger for control, and I choose not to feed it." That's freedom with a soft face. And then comes the fourth way, the one that looks less like resistance and more like walking toward your own life. Because even if you recognize the game, claim your throne, and stop reacting to the hooks, there is still a question beating in the background. Where do you go from here? You go toward reality. Manipulators are architects of alternative worlds. In their world, your needs are inconvenient, your memories are unreliable, your boundaries are betrayals. Leaving the game often means leaving that world emotionally. Sometimes physically, it means stepping back into a reality where your inner signals matter, where love doesn't ask you to disappear. This is rarely a dramatic exit with thunder and a soundtrack. More often it begins small. You tell a friend the truth. You say it out loud, and the air changes. You seek a therapist or counselor who understands control dynamics. You read. You listen. You let language from outside the web recalibrate your compass. Support is not weakness. It is oxygen after a long time underwater. Distance is part of this way. Sometimes that distance is internal, less disclosure, fewer personal openings they can weaponize. Sometimes it is logistical, separate finances, separate living arrangements, fewer shared obligations. And yes, sometimes it is the hard, clean distance of leaving entirely. If you are in a situation that is abusive or unsafe, prioritize safety. First, lean on trusted people, professional resources, local hotlines, legal advice if needed. You are not meant to do this alone. Exiting a manipulator's orbit can provoke backlash. The game hates losing players. Plan wisely, quietly, and with allies. But even when you leave, the echoes may follow. You might hear their voice in your head when you set a boundary with someone kind. You might feel guilty for resting, for thriving, for choosing yourself. This is the afterimage of captivity. So part of walking toward reality is gentle re-education. You practice asking, what do I want? Not what will keep them calm. You relearn pleasure without permission. You sit with people who don't punish you for existing. You do small acts of loyalty to yourself until self-trust grows back like a forest after fire. There's a metaphor I love. If you've lived in a crooked house for years, the straight world feels tilted at first. Peace can feel like boredom. Kindness can feel suspicious. That doesn't mean peace is wrong. It means your nervous system is recalibrating. Stay with the straight world long enough, and your inner level returns. Walking toward your own life is the ultimate refusal of the manipulator's game, because the game says, your story is about me. Your exit says, my story is about being alive, and life, when reclaimed, is not a courtroom. It is a field. It is a road. It is time returned to its rightful owner. You're becoming. So now we stand at a quiet summit, looking back at the path we've walked. You named the spell. You reclaimed the inner throne. You starved the puppet strings. You moved toward reality. For movements, simple in words, profound in practice. But they are not separate steps laid like bricks. They are more like a braid. You may find yourself returning to one again and again. Each return is not failure. It is how freedom grows. Let's contemplate the deeper shape of this. Why are we so vulnerable to manipulators in the first place? Because we are creatures of attachment. We are born needing faces, voices, approval, belonging. A manipulator exploits that ancient wiring. They do not invent your longing. They borrow it. They counterfeit love by using love's raw material against you. This is why your escape must not turn you into stone. If you harden into permanent suspicion, the manipulator wins a final victory. They've made love feel unsafe. The point is not to stop loving. The point is to love without surrendering. Your sovereignty, control, and love are opposites wearing similar masks. Love says, be more yourself. Control says, be the self I can manage. Love listens. Control interprets. Love can handle your no. Control calls it betrayal. When you learn to feel this difference in your bones, it becomes a compass, not only for dealing with manipulators, but for living. You start to notice where you shrink to keep peace. You start to notice where fear dresses as duty. You start to notice the ways time evaporates when you are busy managing someone else's weather. And time is perhaps the most precious thing manipulators steal. Not just hours of argument, but years of self-doubt. So reclaiming yourself is also reclaiming time, the future that expands when you stop negotiating your right to exist, the present that becomes breathable when you stop anticipating the next hook. Maybe you are listening to this and thinking, but what if I still love them? Then let love be honest. Love without clarity is captivity. Love with clarity is a choice. You can care about a person's wounds and still refuse to live inside them. You can wish them healing from afar. You can let the river of your life keep moving even if someone stands on the bank shouting at the water. And if you are still inside the game, be gentle with how long it takes. A web is not left in a single leap. Sometimes the first freedom is only a private thought, a small boundary, a quiet call to a friend. But remember, the moment you see the game, it has already begun to end. Awareness is the first crack in the wall. Let me close like a meditation. Breathe in. Feel the weight of your body on the chair, on the ground, on this planet that has held billions of human dramas and yet stays patient. Breathe out. Imagine the invisible threads loosening, not with violence, but with the simple truth of non-consent. You are not here to be someone else's instrument. You are not a supporting character in a story of control. You are a life, wild, complicated, worthy of your own mercy. And somewhere, as dawn catches the web, the air returns to being air. The cage dissolves, the game goes quiet. You step forward not into a perfect world, but into your world, clear-eyed, whole, free enough to love.